All right, so Willie, what we've got is a generally positive report, but it did come in below expectations. Non-farm payrolls in America grew by 136,000 jobs. Economists were looking for 145,000. But a big bright sign here, the unemployment rate actually goes pretty decently lower to 3.5%. Analysts were expecting 3.7%. That's unchanged. This is, by the way, the lowest unemployment level that we've seen since 1969. Average hourly earnings relatively flat, but it does indicate a 2.9% gain over the same wages that we saw last year. The sectors that we saw the most: healthcare, professional and business services. Meanwhile, manufacturing and retail-related industries saw some of the biggest job losses. I'll also point out that the labor force participation rate, the number of people who were actually counted as being in the workforce, unchanged at 63.2%. And the broadest measure of unemployment, that U6 number, 6.9%. That's actually lower than the previous read. So what it does indicate, Willie, is that the labor force rate has stayed steady and that more people are actually finding jobs. That's the reason why unemployment has gone down. Something the president will probably seize on, likely, is that black unemployment and Hispanic unemployment, both at survey record lows. So we'll continue to kind of monitor this, but markets reacting fairly positively. We'll see if those gains hold into what's happening with the opening bell. Willie, I will also point this out. This is somewhat of a relief given the rash of more, I guess, negative economic data, I guess is the best way to put it, over the course of the past week with regard to manufacturing and services. So that's a big deal.
Yeah, it is. And Elise, if you look at the number, it's not a terribly impressive number, below expectations. But the president, as Dom suggests, will point to the unemployment number, 3.5%. That's incredibly low, record lows for African Americans as well. The politics of this, how will President Trump use it?
Donald Trump needs to make this front and center of his message, and he should, if he is not distracted by attacking and deflecting from his recent calls to use his political power to investigate his political opposition from the Ukraine and China. And so I think that if Donald Trump could stay on message, this could be a win for him, but it's highly unlikely he'll stay on message.
The president wants to hang his hat for 2020 on a strong economy. Yeah. There are a lot of signs, as Dom says, that it's going in a different direction, but he will look at these numbers.
No, and he'll point to these numbers, and these numbers are probably the best thing he has on the economic front. As you said, there are indications that we may be sliding toward recession, and we've been at basically full employment for a while now. Thank you, President Obama. But that's a different story. We've been at basically full employment, yet there's this increasing concern about a slowdown, and so that's the pull and push that he's going to face going into re-election.
So, Dom, you mentioned the manufacturing numbers. Steve Ratner was here earlier with some charts showing the effect that the tariffs have had on manufacturing. How big a concern is that for people down on Wall Street?
Well, it's definitely a concern, and the reason why is because that key gauge of manufacturing that was reported earlier this week showed that we had some of the weakest reads in a decade. That's how bad the manufacturing read has gotten. Now, there are some questions with regard to whether or not that survey data actually fairly represents the manufacturing economy. But what you pointed out is true. The export side of things, manufacturers selling things to other countries, that data was actually a little bit weaker than many had thought. What was a little bit more curious was the services side still shows that we are expanding as an economy, just at slower levels, the lowest levels for services, guys, since 2016.
All right, again, the headline this morning, the U.S. economy added 136,000 jobs in September, the unemployment rate down to 3.5%. CNBC's Dom Chu. Dom, thanks as always.
Sure.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.